Hello there, everyone. My name is Joffrey Falk, and I'm the product manager here at Dexter & Cheney for the Spectrum construction software suite. Today, before we get started in our webinar on connecting and empowering your entire workforce with Spectrum, I want to go through the standard housekeeping stuff. And so what you're seeing here is the GoToWebinar attendee interface, and you're seeing your control panel. It is this control panel that you'll use so that you can interact with us today. The control panel is simple to use. Basically, you click the little orange arrow and that will open or close the panel. Your audio mode, you have one of two options you can use. You can dial in on the call-in number, or you can listen to me on your computer. If you do use the telephone, it'll have a phone number. It'll also have an audio pin that we're going to need you to type in. Now, if you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask. I'll do my best to get to all of the questions that we have, but just go ahead and type them in this questions box, and that way we'll know what kinds of things we'll try to dictate, or not dictate, but we'll try to modify the presentation to some areas that you're looking for. Okay, so let's talk about connecting and empowering your entire workforce with Spectrum. Well, first of all, let me just start off by showing you that here we are at Spectrum. I'm in a web browser. Spectrum runs in a web browser. We use all of the major ones. So this is Google Chrome, but you could also use Mozilla Firefox, Apple Safari, or Internet Explorer, or Internet Edge, or Microsoft's Edge browsers. Now, when we're talking about connecting and getting everybody together with Spectrum, it all really revolves around the fact that we've got this web browser. We all have web-enabled devices. You can log in to Spectrum on a tablet and see this information. The idea is that we're trying to provide this information to everybody so that we all can make the best decisions and be the most efficient that we can. I'm going to go ahead and sign into the system here. And when you sign into Spectrum, you're going to land here at the dashboard. Okay, now everybody has dashboards, but ours are a bit different in that when I click on them, like in this case my project log status, if I click here, it's going to drill me into the system to where I can address these issues. So like negative cash flow, if I click this, it's going to take me to a screen where it's going to explain how this cash flow was calculated, and then I can make best judgments on how to correct those issues. A couple other things before we move on further. We have a favorites bar over here. These favorites are things that either you as the administrator can push out, or the user can add if they have, just like a web browser, favorite screens that you want to go to. A couple other things the main thing I want to point out is that Spectrum is licensed by Concurrent user. So as I log into Spectrum, I'm taking one of those licensed seats. When I sit here on the dashboard like this, I am not using any of those seats. So this is in essence, the idea is that we want you to come in, take a look at what's going on, decide if you need to take additional action, and then get out into the field. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to start off by clicking on one of my jobs here. This is a job that's associated with me, and I'm drilling into the system now. And now I am using one of those Spectrum licenses. So the first page you end up is what we call the job dashboard. And there's a bunch of little apps here that you get to choose from. You can see your open project documents. So here's my correspondence. Here are my owner directives or meetings, memos, submittal transmittals. All of that is sitting right here. Again, I can continue to click and I'll drill down even further into the system. Here you can see my gain and fade chart. You can see my revised contract, and then you can see the projected costs. And right here in this area, this is an example where my projected costs shoot up, my cost budget shoots up, but and I'm effectively losing money. And then you see I got the change order a couple months later, and everything's all fine and dandy. So it's the fact that when the projected costs shot up, that's a good indication of profit fade, that somebody needed to go get a change order. We have some progress bars here, so you can see bill to date and cost to date. You see how far we are along the project. We have what we call shift, where we start off with the original contract, and then how much has the contract changed, in respect to the contract value and the profit. How much has it changed since the beginning? And finally, we've got some job to date. You can see that this is the actual equipment hours. We're 15.86% complete to our budget, and our labor, we're at 9.63% of our budget. Now over here on the left-hand side, this is what we call the job info bar. Now the job info bar is used to let you navigate throughout Spectrum, and it lets you go to all the places that you'd ever want to go to in context of this job. So I'm going to click on Job Analysis, and this is going to take me to another page. Now this is more of your financial analysis type screen. You can see our revised contract, the profit that we're expecting to earn, our earned revenue at this point, are we over under billing, cost to complete. Here's that cash flow information I was talking about. You can see I've got 61,000 of cash in and 39,000 of cash out. And then you can also see that the customer does owe me some money, so my negative cash outflow isn't as bad as it looks here. I've got a recap of hours job to date, my projected budget, as well as my estimated budget and variances from those numbers. And you can see that this is the primary contract information. Now, in this contract, it just so happens that I have more than one customer. I may have, in this one, for whatever reason, I have 4 additional contracts. And you guys know how this all works. You may have one primary customer that you work with or work for, but while you're there on the project, somebody else, there's like a side job or a side project. You still want to capture those costs, but you're going to bill somebody else. Okay. Again, I'm just going down this info bar, and I want to go to the contract status page. What this is showing you is, here is by date, our revised contract. So you can see in the beginning that we were at 2.3 million, and now we're up to 45 million. You can see how the costs, the projected costs, my gross profit percentage, my earned revenue, how this is all changing over time. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that to give us more room. And then this is basically a running like WIP report where you can see your earned revenue, are you over under billed, percent complete, and so forth. So this gives the project manager a snapshot of where they are in their job. Again, good financial information. Okay. I'm going to head down the info bar to this property section, and first thing you see, a map pops out. So the map is based on my GPS coordinates for this project. But the idea here is that, so this is my, my basic project, my legal description for lien releases, my primary customer address information. Now, every project, they always say, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. Same thing with our projects. How do we break them up into manageable chunks? We call those manageable chunks phases. Others call them cost codes. I've heard them called work breakdown structure codes. It's basically the same thing. These are just ways to segment or break up the project. They might be CSI codes, all that. Now, one thing I want to point out is that when you have your breakdown code, there's some information in here that is, of course, important. You've got your original estimate and your current estimate. Of course, the original estimate was what you had on day one, and your current estimate, this is plus or minus any changes based on your change orders. And there's some other good information that you can default into here. Now, the reason that again, we're trying to make things easier with Spectrum so that everybody can get into the system, get the information, and get out. What I'm wanting you to see is that by teaching your staff how to use, say, the info bar, they don't have to really understand how to go to a menu, choose an option, and drill down that way. They basically, from the dashboard, go into the project they need to see, and then they can use the info bar to navigate further. So here is a project. This is these are our contacts that are on the project. One thing I want to point out is that these contacts, these could be people that are vendors or subcontractors that you work for or work with. They could be your customers that you work for. And we can store all sorts of information about them. We have unlimited addresses. Of course, in this case, it's a vendor, so we have the vendor address from the accounts payable area of the system. And when Or if somebody changes the address over an AP, of course it changes it here for my project managers as well. Same thing with the phone numbers. Now, as we go through, notice that these contacts on this list, these are the contacts that will be sending out things like an RFI, a field question, maybe a daily log, or submittals, all that kind of stuff. And last but not least, as a setup issue, because again, we're trying to make things easy, this contact is set up at the vendor. So Hudson James is at the vendor, and as I set up a new subcontract with this vendor, it's going to put Hudson on my contact list automatically for me. And then if I want, I can always remove someone from the list if they're not needed to be there. And again, you can give security so that the project managers can add their additional contacts as needed as well. This is just a good dates page. This is going to talk about our estimated and actual start and end dates. Also some job cost history dates that are very important. The last date we did a projected cost, the last date we did a certified payroll, our last payroll date, costing dates and billing dates, all that good stuff is in here. Project managers that have heavy equipment to manage, there is a cost of these pieces of equipment, and so what we can do is they can either be charged to the job at their standard rate, or you can say, for this project, I'm going to charge them to the job at $125 an hour. Or if it's one of those areas that the ground is really rough and it's going to beat the out of the blade, I can say we're going to charge $225 an hour because that'll pay for the replacement blades and other such. Of course, Spectrum, we're not an estimating software, but we link with all of the big estimating programs. The idea is that you can bring in your estimates, again, those phases, work breakdown, structure, cost codes. You can bring all that stuff in from various estimating packages or even from an Excel file. You bring these things in. You can also create, with these imports, you can create a subcontract or subcontracts where you can create subcontracts into the system. You can also create your AIA schedule of values billing. And so in this case, this is how the customer wants to be billed. And so I can use this to set all of this good stuff up. Okay, I want to talk about the master job setup here. This is one of those things that you may not need it, but it's really, really handy. And again, what I'm talking about here is the FASB, or on the accounting side of the house, the Financial Accounting Standards Board has made a lot of changes with regards to revenue recognition. Up until now, we've used percent of completion. It's been our standby. It's been wonderful. But there are certain situations where you must segment the job into smaller sub-jobs. We can use this master sub-job to manage all of that. And so here I have a sub-job, and all of the costs, when I run the report for the main job, this King County Highway 18 project, number 300, all of the costs and billings from these two sub-jobs are going to appear under that number. Now, again, I'm going to dweeb out on us here, and the reason this is important is that if you have to segment the jobs and have different performance obligations, you can use the master sub-job to earn your revenue in the manner that the FASB is telling us that we're going to be doing. The idea is that instead of using percent of completion, we'll use something that is very similar to that, but each of the sub-jobs would have their own calculation, and then we would add them up. I know, forgive me, revenue recognition, I've got it on the brain. Other things that we have here, I just want to point out, if this is a time and material job, you can set this up to be a time and material job and how you're going to bill it, and any kind of markups, add-ons, and fees. Okay, let's look at time passes, and our project is underway, and now we have got some information to look at here. Let me just check. That's right. I just want to make sure you guys can see my screen. So here is, I've got this set up as by cost type, and when I click on the little expander bar, and that breaks into this 2 digits, and I click on it again, and there's the actual phase. I have defined that the first 2 digits are what I call a major group, and so I can choose to look at this by major group, do a budget versus actual. Make sure that if I'm in line, I go on to the next group. If I'm not in line, then I can drill in and get the detail. The thing about this kind of screen is I can create as many of these, say, save selections to change the way these are all viewed. This last one here, this is where my projected cost budget is greater than my estimated cost budget. So, and this one right here, 150,000 is what the project manager thinks this is going to come in at, versus all of my change orders and all the other estimated documentation says it's only going to be 50 grand. It's an indication that there could be profit fade, and that I need to do some research. Now, one thing about this screen is we call them tree grids. The idea is that you can do a whole bunch of things with them. You can say that you want to sort them by phase. You can then the idea is that you can basically group them in a variety of ways so that you can then be able to do your management or your review. I'm going to go to the history page. This is the same kind of tree grid, but this is job cost history. So these are all of the true pieces of costs that we have had that hit the job. Now I can, again, see it by phase or by phase cost type. I can also say I want to see it by, where's what I'm looking for? I can go ahead and say I want to see it by type. Okay, so these are my vendor costs. These are my equipment costs that I can expand. These are inventory items that I've ordered to the job. These are my payroll costs that I've ordered to the job. Again, the idea is that we're trying to make this easy, give you enough information so that you can make the best decision on how to manage your job and how to get things done in a quick and timely manner. Okay. Now, going back with that empowerment is that we want to have we want the decisions to be made by the level that it makes the most sense. And so pay when paid. This is the scenario that you may want your project managers or project admins to review these invoices and then give them their final blessing or approval before they actually get the checks get cut. These invoices have already gone through our approval process. They've been booked into the system, but now it's time to pay them. And you can see that this number here, 100% of the invoice was paid, and so we can either choose, it can be set to automatically release, or I can say, no, I'm going to review it for next time, or I'm going to say, well, we're going to wait. And I can add a note if I wanted to add a note. And here you can see I had one that says, don't want to pay this right now. But the idea here is that we're giving the control to the people that know the best. And so you can say, I want to sort this screen by vendor, and okay, these vendors, Aurora Flooring, there's no concerns, I have no problems, I can go ahead and pay those items out. Okay. Likewise, job requisitions, this is where you can order inventory for your project. We have a materials page. And again, oops, here, the materials page, what this is going to show you is these are the items that you've requested for the job. You may have had to order them outside of your organization through a purchase order, or maybe you did them internally because you had them stocked in inventory. And so that's what that screen is telling us. If you have security, you can actually create a new purchase order or a new job requisition from here. So since I have the ability, I see the button and I can click it, and it's going to take me over to the new purchase order entry screen. And notice that it knows I came from job 300, so it defaults that in. I can go ahead and throw in the vendor that I'm looking for. I wanted that Aurora Flooring people. Aurora. Come on, I can't type. And it found the vendor for me, and I can continue to fill this out. Now, you may not want certain folks to be entering purchase orders, and that's a security issue, so these buttons just get suppressed if you don't have security for that. In Spectrum, we have two major budget groups. We have our estimates. Estimates are those things that we've estimated out with our estimating programs. They're due to things that either budget allocations or change orders, but they're official type stuff. But then we have what we call projected costs, and this is where the project manager goes out and makes it a determination that, yeah, I think this is what the costs at completion are going to be. And so when you come into this screen, projected costs, you can choose to look at it very simple and a straightforward way. So you can see my last projected cost here. I said that this phase was going to be 20% done. Well, I can say, you know, I'm 20% complete. Maybe instead of 20% complete, I'm really 75% complete. And that's going to force out a new dollars at completion. Or based on facts and circumstances, I know that this phase is going to come in at $10,000. So I can just enter $10,000 and it backs into the other numbers. The reason I'm showing you this is that this analysis is all being done to generate what we think the cost at completion is going to be. We then use that budgeted or that projected cost at completion in our percent of completion analysis when we do our earned revenue. Now, you can also look at this on a more granular level, and so I just hit the expand button here, and you can see that I've got dollars, hours, dollars per hour, quantities, dollars per unit, unit per hour, etc. What this means is in certain situations it makes sense that we want to we want to look at this maybe either on a quantity basis to push out our dollars at completion, or we want to use maybe the hours. So in this case, it's saying that my hours at completion are 464, but I know they're really going to be 600. So I hit 600, and it again recalculates all of my numbers. Well, 600 is probably the wrong number if you look at this here, because my actuals are 949. So why don't we just go ahead and make these 1,000? There we go. And so in this case, it changes up the calculation, again, the cost at completion, and that's what we're trying to get to. Now, this order of operations are really important. If you're going to do this type of analysis, you as the user are going to want to control how things get changed. And so when I change my dollars, my hours are changing. And when my hours are changing, change the dollars. But see how you can manipulate, and you can say that when the dollars per hour change, recalculate the hours bucket, or you want to recalculate the dollars bucket. You can keep changing this as you go down line by line to develop or to get to that projected cost, that cost at completion that we care about. Okay, now you notice I haven't left, even though I've got extra tabs across the top here, I've not had to go out to any menu system. And again, part of getting folks to use the system and empower them to make the right decisions is that they've got to be able to figure it out. And all I'm doing is just going down this info bar. Quantity complete, this is where I can put in quantities of finished production units. So I can say, we did so many miles of freeway, or I installed so many yards of fiber optics. That's what this screen is for. Now again, some of these you may not want certain folks to have access to, and you can just go ahead and suppress that with security. These are my subcontracts that I have on this project. Now notice my job info bar is now joined by a vendor and subcontract info bar. And so on the subcontract info bar, I can choose to look at the financials and say, well, let's see how we're doing here. And you can see that total invoices I've paid, or I've invoiced $23,850. I've paid the 23. I've got some discounts. I've got some unposted or unapproved transactions here. The idea, I can do some research here. I can say, well, hey, here's an invoice. What's its status? And you can see the outstanding balance is $255. This is how it was coded. If there was images attached to it, it would also be, it would also display here as well. Okay. So again, in the job world, we have this concept of documents. And so a couple things that I want to point out are that in that documents world, we have things like what we call, you might have your submittals, your RFIs, your field questions. We store all of those in what we call a project log, and again, it uses the same kind of tree grid technology where you can see your various items here. And so if I wanted to look at a daily log, when I open this up and look at it, the actual data behind it, we're using what's called HTML5, another one of those new technologies, and you can come in and obviously somebody wrote not much of anything. You can see that we've got, this is where I would store the prime contractor work. Is there any notes that I need to store? Blah, blah, blah. You know, the subs that were on site, is there any notes about the subs? Is there a schedule concern, a safety concern? I can add related documents, and so for whatever reason, for whatever reason I want to attach to this, say a drawing, which there are none, but you could attach a drawing or other things so that it would all be reflected in this. Likewise, if I wanted to create an RFI, you know, again, there is a, we've uncovered either a cost or a time impact on the job. I can create an RFI, and you can see these are the people that it's going to go to. Again, I can add more people, and the people that are on this list, they come from that contact list we looked at earlier. And so what's your spec section? Is there a topic, cost impact, time impact, drawing impact? You've got your text. Now, one thing I want to point out, we haven't talked much about this, but we have imaging built into Spectrum. And when I say imaging, see, here is this form. This form, let's just say this was what triggered this RFI for sake of argument. And then you see there's this red padlock. This means I'm going to either share it with the outside or I'm going to keep it internal. And I'm going to make it quote-unquote shareable because I want to show you how this is going to work. When I preview this report, okay, you see all of this information. Here's the other related documents that have been assigned to this. When I preview this, it's going to say, hey, do you want to include all those other documents? And I say yes. And it's going to create this form that was going to have the information, of course, that we just saw. Now, but notice, so this is page one. This is page one of the report, that all the fields that we had talked about. Here's that attachment. It's embedded in this. And then we go to the next, that image, that embed had a picture. And then here's a piece of correspondence. And here's another change, all these different things. And if they had images attached to them, they would also be bundled in here as well. Now, the reason that that's important is that when I click the email button, I can email this to all of those people that were on my list, and it's basically one PDF that has the report, in this case RFI number 1. It has any images or files attached to it, and then it has all of the related document and their underlying correspondence and images attached with it as well, all in one PDF file. So you can go ahead and email this out. We can log that we emailed this out, and it will create a transmittal for us automatically. So this, in our project log, this is how we manage all of those various types of correspondence and RFIs and basically documentation that happens at the job site. Now, of course, we also can do things. We have this concept of compliance tracking. Compliance tracking is where you can manage and make sure that your subcontractors are giving you their insurance certificates. You can manage that owner lien releases have been returned signed. You can manage all of this type of stuff. We also have, again, going back to imaging, here are all of the images associated with this project. And so I can click on this one. There's RFI 20, and it's going to draw the picture. And then I'm going to click this one, and it's going to draw its picture. And you can see I can just select what I want to see going down and going down my list. Now, at the bottom here, I've got one called Large Document Example. This one's about 30 pages long. And I want you to notice that it pulls up the first page immediately, but as I scroll down, it's still downloading in the background. Now, I know this isn't that shocking to any of us that use the internet. This technology is called AJAX, or Asynchronous Javascript. And what's cool about it is it's still downloading in the background, but I can look at this page and get to work. So why this is important is if I'm at a job site and I am dialed in and maybe I don't have the best internet connection, it might be slow, I can start looking at page 1 or page 30 of that document that I'm trying to pull over the line, and I can start reading it and deal with it. Now, I know this is really small to see here, and so I can pop it out to a browser tab, and in this case, and then of course it takes up my full screen. Now, one of the cool things about browsers is that you can, of course, take that browser page and you can drag it over to another monitor if you want to. Okay. So imaging, really cool. It allows you to store and retrieve information quickly and easily. You can also create unlimited amounts of notes. You can see I've got all these different things in here. The idea being that if you wanted to have like a running log of things going on, you can do that as well. Okay. So I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in. One of the questions, using quantity complete, will this generate invoices for the period? The quantity complete that I looked at in the cost section, this quantity complete, this is your finished production quantities. And so for those people that say build roads, work for like the state DOTs, you know that you've created 20 miles of freeway. But the state inspector comes out and says, well, we're only going to pay you for 15. Because there's a lag. You know, they come out and then there might be a time lag, a difference. The quantities that I was talking about in that quantity complete screen, those are the quantities that I believe I have done. So I can run my report and say, hey, here are my true actual costs divided by the quantities that I've completed, you know, and then I can, of course, compare that to my estimates. The billing quantities are actually not automatically generated from here because there is a time lag. Usually the DOTs, you're a month or more behind, and we're trying to keep you up to date, so your quantities are going to be more real-time. You can bring them in daily, you can bring them in monthly, but you don't have to wait until the billing quantities are caught up to date. Okay, good question. I'm moving on to contract changes. We call these change requests. These are proposed change orders, or these are the precursors to a change order, or whatever you want to call them. These are kind of the landing places for things. The idea here is that we end up wanting, we have a question. Some kind of question has been raised, perhaps an RFI has come out, and that will have a cost or a time impact. So we come into this change request, and we of course first attach that RFI is part of this, and maybe there's some correspondence we want to attach as well. And then we look at and we start going through, well, what is the cost and time impact? Well, the cost are to these different phases or budgets items, and this is what we think they're going to cost. And you can see that not only is there a $10,000 estimate to materials, I have a $50,000 estimate to my subcontractors. Now, if based on my facts and circumstances and the way my project is set up, I can come in and have automatic markups. And so you notice that I have $15,000 of markups. That came from this screen here where I had 25% markups on material and 25 on subs. Maybe subs is a little excessive, and so I'll just say 5%. Okay? Are there any add-ons? These are those overhead add-on items that you want, that you're contractually allowed to bill for. And then, of course, when we get to the billing side, how do we want to bill our customer for this? If we don't know what the billing is, because in this case this is just a proposed change request, we can just leave this blank until we're done, and basically based on our takeoff total, markups, add-ons, fees, we're going to get what we think the change request total is going to become. Of course, we can also attach any imaging or supporting documentation to this record as well. Okay. Of course, we love notes, so you can add as many notes, unlimited notes to this to help support what you're doing as well. And then dates, if this was one of those where there was a time impact, you would say I'm requesting so many days delay. And then of course we have a place to store when it comes back to, no, I requested 15 days delay and they're giving me 1. Also, you have a place to store your swag or your verbals. You know, on this date I told you that it was going to be, you know, $10,000 or whatever. These change requests can then get rolled up into a change order. And so, you know, depending on your processes, you can you can come in and say that for this change order, I want to, here, let's just do some numbers here. I want to attach these change requests. So we're going to do this, got a question, and we need better coffee at the job site, and we need more coffee at the job site. Okay. Oops, you can see I've got one of my change requests isn't been fully assigned, so it gives you some, it protects you from making some silly mistakes. And you can see I've got a few of these here. Great, I'm really not, obviously I'm not a good project manager. Okay, so, but you get the idea here. We can come in and manage the changes to our contracts. And the idea is that by keeping tabs on all of these things, we can, of course, make sure that we're not leaving money on the table. Okay. Of course, we have our billing history where you can see this is how we billed the job out. If it was a time and material job, you can see all of that. And then these are the reports that are associated with this job. If I wanted to, say, run a report for, say, job cost history, I'm now at the job cost history report start screen, and we use Crystal Reports as our print engine. And one of the things that we do is we generate the report in Crystal Reports at the server using a server version of Crystal, and then we spit it out to the browser as a PDF. And so now that it's here, I can download it, I can email it, I have this full PDF. Now, there are certain situations, you see I've got these blue hyperlinks. Those have images associated with them. And so if I go back to the job cost history report, there's this distribute button. I can click this, and what this will do is it will basically create, it'll create the same report that you saw, but it will also create a zip file that you can give to your end user customer, and what it'll do is it's basically a way of providing them your substantiation for the project. So if you've got a job that has to be substantiated or they want to audit your costs, you can run this report and it will give them, and then when they look at the report, they'll see all these hyperlinks. They click it, it'll call up the image. Okay. So we've been talking primarily about job cost, but there are other things in the system besides just tracking that. And again, you notice we did all these things without going to a menu. Now, if you want, you can go to a menu. And so I can go to what we call the sitemap, and you see we have the variety of options just like you'd expect. Accounts payable. I can come in and I can look at, say, invoice approval. This is a process. I have nothing to approve. I'm obviously doing my job. Let's look at these guys. Okay, so you can see that, again, it's another one of these tree grids, and the idea is that I can highlight, or I can look at one of these, and here's the charging that happened. I can make changes to that charge, to the charge lines. If there was an image attached with this, I could see the image attached to it. Over here, I see some information about that vendor, and so if I want to see, then I can, from using the vendor info bar, I can see what else do we owe them, what else is some information about them, do we have any other, any other issues that I need to be aware of before I say, yeah, go ahead and pay this guy. So I go ahead and I make my selections. I say that I can add notes. I can go ahead and say we're going to reject this one. Why? Because I said so. Okay. And then I update now, and basically these invoices go to the next person on the routing tree to make, and they come off of my list and they go to the next group to then manage. Now, I bring this up because invoice approval is really powerful. It gives you the ability that when the invoice comes in, we can say, hey, did you really mean this is what you wanted? Yes or no type thing. Now, when you run these job cost reports, a lot of these reports, you see there's little check boxes that say, hey, do you want to include AP invoices in progress? That's a fancy way of saying, do you want to include invoices for this job that are over here in the invoice approval process that we just haven't gotten to yet? And so we let you, on a case-by-case basis, decide, yeah, I want to include them, or no, I don't want to include them. Okay. Looking at the billing of a project, again, we come into this schedule of values, and we basically are saying, what is it that we're trying to bill here? How many quantities have we done? What is our percentage that has been done? I have a bunch of, as you know, a lot of these jobs, while they may be a unit price bill, you still have fixed price items that you want to deal with. So you can go ahead and do that. So here I'll say I have one quantity bill for. I can override the retention if I need to, and then of course I create that AR invoice and the draw request that goes with this. Okay. As we move through these other screens, are there any questions of things that you want to see? Because I will try to make a little detour through there. Okay. Payroll is one of those areas that we joke that if it wasn't for payroll, there'd be a lot more competition in our area. Payroll is just one of those things that is complicated. You know that. You've got all the different union rules and reciprocity rules, and it's just really convoluted at times. So with payroll, and because of payroll, we joke that we keep out a lot of people out of the marketplace, which is kind of I guess that's a barrier to entry is probably the better way of saying it. Okay, so I call up an employee. We have an employee info bar. You want to see something, you want to see the main page for this employee. This is where their standard charging, their union affiliation, their hire date, termination dates. We have a page of personal information where you can see all of the different items that they need to, that you want to, emergency contacts, mailing addresses, etc. Pay rates. We either are going to pay them, we have a couple of ways that we can pay this guy. They can have a base pay rate, but of course we can also say that when they work on a certified job, they get the higher of the certified rate or their home rate. Tax setup. This is set up for the United States, but at the same time know that we also support Canadian payroll, so this could be the Canadian, instead of being Canadian, or instead of being resident states, it'd be resident provinces. And all of that. You can choose that this person is and it lives in the state of Washington, and then you can make some decisions of, well, when they work in California, which has an income tax, but they live in Washington state that doesn't, whose tax do we pay? We default that we're paying all taxes because that's the most conservative. Okay, auto deposit, direct deposit, we can either allocate money on a percentage basis, say I want to put 5% to savings and the rest to checking, or I want to put so many dollars to my savings account and the rest goes into my main account. Add-ons, here I've got a 401k fixed amount of $500 per pay cycle. Time off banks, this is where I have my vacation, holiday, and sick and their accrual hours. I can then look at the summary pay, the summary information for this guy, and we have nothing. Wow, somebody has gone in and done the year-to-date clear. I've got checks. This is, you can see this is where this check, I can drill into this check, and here were the gross earnings, all of my taxes. I can look at the different jurisdictions or taxes that this paycheck took part in. If you're in Ohio, of course, that means that we will support the state, the county, the local, or different tax codes, your workers' comp, any deductions or add-ons. All of this is explained in here. And if you want to look at the actual time cards, you can see these were the time cards that we were charged to these various jobs and unions. Okay. Couple other things just to kind of point out for those folks that do work international, we have the ability to support multiple currencies. Let's go look at purchase orders. Purchase orders, again, I want to order some materials for my job. And this document tracking, this is warning me that my insurance certificate is expiring in less than 30 days. Now I can also have it set that if it has expired, it wouldn't let me pay that vendor until I got that appropriately. So here I can come in on the purchase order. I've got all this information. I can of course manipulate it or change it if I need to. And then I have default sales or use tax. How am I going to receive the goods? Is it unit price lump sum? Do I want to add a comment? And then I get into the distribution. I have two types of rows, detail rows and message rows. The detail row. So let's say I want to have 100, and I just so happens that I don't know what the item code is, but I know that it's a coffee filter. Again, can you tell I'm needing coffee? So I can go ahead and say there's my coffee filter, and it defaults in the unit price, and as the purchasing agent I can say, well, that's not right. We get the really good ones, so they're 21 bucks. It does the extension, and then I can code it to the job. Again, I can code it to my phase, cost code, work breakdown structure, and I'm going to charge it to field engineering. Okay, and this phase is over budget. Well, that's not a good sign either. And you can see the tax code, and I can put in delivery dates, and I can continue to create this. Now, when it's all said and done, of course, I can print this. I can print out my purchase order form, and then this can, of course, then go to the vendor, and we are in business. Because I charged this to a job, this $2,100 is going to appear as a commitment, as an open commitment on the job. And when I run those job cost reports, I can say I want to include that $2,100, even though it's not a real accounting cost. For purposes of my analysis, I want to include it in my job to date actuals. So that is something that we can do. Okay. We're getting closer to the top of the hour. A couple things that I do want to point out. This one is a little strange, so bear with me. And by strange, I mean it's hard to explain. So I'm going to bring up good old Microsoft Excel. One of the challenges of any system is getting data in or getting data out of the system. We have developed web services to be able to help us with this. Now, all a web services is a program that talks from one computer to the next. We have, and so I called up Microsoft Excel here because we have a little add-in program that we've written, and what we can do is we have these special templates that we have programmed, and if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to bring in my customers. This is the customer template. I can say anything that's in yellow, by the way, those are required fields, and so I can say I want to, for the ABC company, I want to bring in the customer, oh, red says that don't forget me. I can say I want to have customer code 777 ABC, and I want the name to be Bob, and I can fill this out. And again, as long as I go through at a minimum, fill out these minimum required fields, sales tax code, I just am making stuff up. But the idea is that once this is all said and done, you can see all the different pieces of data here that you can put in. I then go ahead and say sync, and it's going to send the data back to Spectrum. Now, this is really handy when it comes to things like conversion. You can be able to get your data. You can, if you can get the data from your old system into a spreadsheet, you can bring it in. But the other side is there's a lot of also long-term usage of this. So again, on these templates, some folks make incredibly complicated journal entries on a monthly basis. Well, if you can, say, standardize it so that it can then fit into a spreadsheet, you can enter this 8,000-line journal entry, and you could put it here. You'll be able to import it into Spectrum, and then from there you would post it. So there are scenarios where these web services come in handy. Now, another thing that these web services do is it lets us send data. We have a payroll time entry app, and I was going to show you this, but the little tool that I use to show my phone is not working. But the idea is that you can have an app that's either iOS or Android, and you can enter payroll time on that phone, and then it gets synced up with a portal, it gets approved, and then it comes into Spectrum. You can also use, if there is a time workbook that basically if your guys have access to a laptop, you can have the crew of people out there, and the foreman can go ahead and complete this job timesheet, and when they're ready to go, they sync or they send the data over to Spectrum. We also link with other types of packages. In the service world, we link with a group called Field Connect. Again, we're using web services to pass data backwards and forwards. web services are, or the new modern way of what we used to in the olden days. We would say, hey, we're going to do a comma delimited import or export. So in that case, that's basically what web services are going to do for us. Any other questions that we have out here, guys? I've covered a lot of the questions that have come through the board, just in general course. So let's leave out on the general ledger, because of course that's all accountants' favorite place. So you can see our various, this is more the summary layer, so here's all my general ledger amounts, accounts, and if I want, I can drill into the actual detail, and again, we're using those tree grids, so I can see everything that is here. If there was images attached to these transactions, I can open the slider bar and I would see any of those transactions. If I had any supporting documentation there, it would be sitting there waiting for me. Likewise, I can take this data and I can export it to Excel if I want to use it in some other type of fashion as well. Well, we are getting close to the top of the hour. I appreciate that everybody, you spent some time with us today. If you have additional questions, let us know. We'll be reaching out to you. We're happy to do a deep dive demo and maybe more of a one-on-one, and we can focus the demo more on specifically what your needs are going to be. So thanks again for spending the hour with us, and you guys have a great rest of week.